October 24th is the day April didn't die. Thanks to the Snohomish High School students who rushed to her aid, the Snohomish paramedics who made a split-second decision to transport April to Everett instead of an airlift to Seattle, and the Providence surgeons and nurses who began operating on her damaged heart in the emergency room. April would have died that day, but dozens of heroes came together, giving all they had to make sure she would see another day.
April actually rode the bus with me because she stayed the night, and then we just got to school and the bus gets there early, so we tried to go to the bathroom, which we usually go, and the bathroom is locked, so we went to the other bathroom. We were just getting our makeup done and brushing our teeth, and then the girl that attacked April, she peeked out of the stall, and then she came out of the stall and she had the knife at her side and stuff, and then she was backing April against the wall kind of, but they weren't at the wall yet. And then I remember running out and stuff and yelling for help. And then when I went back in, I just remember her standing over April with the knife at her side, and April was all bloody and laying on the floor under the sinks. And then I remember running out, and they were screaming for help, and realizing that my arm was cut.
I was hanging out with my friends, and then I heard some screaming, and so I just figured it was some people just playing around, and I went down there, and I saw Becca come running out with her arm slashed open.
They got paper towels and told me to put pressure on my arm, and then a girl led me out into the office, and then I sat there and held my arm up, and then I kind of fainted a little bit, I think, 'cause I don't remember that much.
So when I went in the bathroom, the whole entire ground was just covered in blood. You couldn't even see the tile. It was just all red, and I didn't see the other girl. I was just focused in on April and just looked and saw her, and then just went to her and put paper towel on her neck and helped her. And then I hear something drop behind me and a clink, and I looked back and there's a knife drop behind me. When the girl dropped the knife, I looked up at her and she was just dressed in full black behind me and just looking down at me, just with no emotional expression, just looking. And I look back at April, and she's just crying, and she's looking at me just saying, "I just want to see my mom. I just want to see my mom." And then must have been there for about 5 more seconds, and the teacher comes in and says, "Leave." So I got up and I left, and that was about it. Just went about my day after that.
So about 7:30 in the morning, we were dispatched to the Snohomish High School for a stabbing. Indications on dispatch were that it was a serious event, and it caused several units to be dispatched. When we arrived, looked like there had been a significant assault. There was some blood and a large knife on the floor. We all immediately realized that we had a very sick, critically ill patient, and made motions to get her out of the bathroom and to the ambulance. We, at that point, decided to call airlift to have her airlifted from the high school to Harborview, the Level 1 trauma center in the state.
First bit of information that we had at that point was that there was a 14-year-old stabbing victim at a high school student, and that CPR was in progress. And so my immediate reaction, I have a 14-year-old daughter myself, and so obviously my immediate reaction was making sure that it was coming from a direction other than her high school, which it was, and then we immediately set to work getting prepared for her to arrive.
And when we entered the emergency department, she had just arrived. They had just stopped CPR and noted that she did in fact have a blood pressure and a pulse.
And we also examined her wounds. At that point, found that her stab wound of immediate concern was in her left upper chest, just below her clavicle, just below the collarbone. And when I probed that wound with my finger, I found that it went all the way down to the chest wall.
She had an injury up here in her chest, and even though I found out that the weapon was 12 inches long, I had very, very small suspicion that this injury would go all the way from her chest down and injure her heart.
She started dropping her blood pressure again, and at that point we initiated CPR again, and Dr. Austin and Dr. Costas proceeded to open the chest in the emergency room.
So Dr. Austin made an incision in her left chest while I placed a needle into the pericardial sac to try to decompress the fluid around the heart. And the two of us together opened up the sac around the heart a little bit further and identified a hole in the heart at that point. And put my finger on it to hold pressure. Dr. Austin helped continue resuscitation, and we got to the point where she actually did resuscitate well, had a blood pressure, had a heart rate. So we switched positions. Dr. Austin's finger on the hole. I went out and talked to the patient's family to tell them what was going on.
So fortunately, we were able to take her up to the operating room, and my major concern at that point, since we had control of the bleeding, was what I was going to have to do in terms of the surgery.
And Dr. Austin did what's called a sternotomy, an incision in the center of the chest. You go through the breastbone and open that up to get access to the heart. And we evaluated the hole. The hole was actually right next to the left anterior descending. Dr. Austin placed 2 stitches, sealed the hole.
The injury was right here. And if it had been 4 millimeters to the right, it would have gotten this artery to the front of her heart, which would have caused her heart to go into the bad rhythm fibrillation at the scene, and she would have died.
When that was done, we put April back on her back and proceeded to assess all the other wounds.
Total number of lacerations, cuts was about 15, probably resulting from 10 separate stabbings. So some of them actually went through and stabbed first the right leg and injured the left leg.
And in the end, she was doing quite well. She was transferred from the operating room to the intensive care unit, where she continued to stabilize and ultimately was able to come off of the breathing machine that night. And by the next morning, she was very stable.
Really, this young girl is as tough as nails. She had an incision on her chest here. She had an incision on the left side of her chest. She had incisions all over her legs that had to be closed and so on. And yet the day after surgery, she was up out of bed, sitting in the chair, the following day walking in the halls, whereas anybody else, myself included, would still be paralyzed in the room, lying in the bed and moaning. But she was up walking around and doing what 14-year-olds do.
That day, we, as an extraordinary group of individuals, the team really had an extraordinary outcome for this young woman. And so, I certainly don't consider myself a hero because, again, that's what we do day in and day out. I think the real heroes in this were the kids that put their lives on the line and jumped in between the attacker and April. And that took some incredible courage.
I'm very happy about the outcome. This is something we're trained to do. I trained at Harborview, and this is something that I saw, unfortunately, not too infrequently. I certainly don't feel that I alone saved April's life, There were so many people involved, from the high school bathroom to her discharge.
I have a hard time accepting some of this praise, actually. I want to pass it along to my crew, because without them, without the guys on the crew, Jesse Altizer, Sean Osborne, Jason Hodkinson, Chris Burnett, the outcome would have been different. It wasn't just my decisions, it was the decisions of the entire crew that resulted in this positive outcome.
There are so many things here that have to make you believe that Providence had a hand in, and I don't mean the hospital, had a hand in getting this woman, young woman, through this ordeal, and hopefully both the emotional and physical scars will heal, and she'll go on and someday be graduating from university and looking at getting a job and having a family of her own and living a good, long, healthy life. And this will all be just a distant memory.